This is becoming a book journal club instead of a movie thing, but next up was Island of Dr. Moreau by H.G. Wells, not to be confused with Orson Welles, not to be confused with Orson Scott Card,
No one would confuse that.
not to be confused with Ida B. Wells.
This is all getting cut. Anyway,
Yeah.
so we watched Island of Lost Souls, which is based on...
The Island of Dr.
I don't know
Moreau.
why they changed the name. Do you know why?
No, I'm not sure either, which I have a bone to pick with that one.
I have many bones to pick. But they changed almost... I mean, it's very clearly from the book, and they don't try to hide it or anything, so I don't know why they kept... Why did they keep the name?
Especially because they don't hide the fact that it's Dr. Moreau for more than 2 minutes in the movie.
Okay.
I think this conversation, starts with H.G. Wells. H.G. Wells is the author of this book, born in 1866. He was described in his Wikipedia article as utopian, progressive, and a futurist.
The father of science fiction, right?
That's what they said.
I mean, he wrote War of the Worlds,
Time Machine,
The Invisible Man, and he was writing about 1890s to
something like that.
Something like that time frame, which is pretty pioneering. There you go. That's the word.
Yeah. There was a funny quote in the Wikipedia article, something like his life was a little bit crazy because his parents had a turbulent marriage. Owing to his mother being a Protestant and his father being a free thinker.
Oh.
That was the quote that was on there. But yeah, basically he grew up. His father was a professional cricketer, had some money.
Really?
Yeah. And then he broke his leg, was not a cricketer anymore. And then they had this little shop, but it wasn't doing well. So then Wells had to go and work at, I don't know, a dry cleaning company or something like that, some dryers.
Okay.
And then he got an apprenticeship at a grammar school. And then eventually his parents were like, hey, man, you I think the situation was such that he needed to go back and basically work at the dryers.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, no. Worked hard and got himself a scholarship. And then eventually started writing for...
Didn't he have a degree in zoology or something? I thought I saw that.
Yeah, there's also that. Yeah, that's right.
That's kind of...
I don't even know how that happened. Yeah.
Relevant to,
Yeah, he got a biology degree, but then, ended up writing for the Pall Mall Gazette, which has come up in A Trip to the Moon. They coined the term spaceship.
Who?
The Pall Mall Gazette. That was the publication, which apparently, I guess, was a big publication of the time.
Oh, where that guy...
So H.G. Wells wrote for it afterwards after that.
Yeah, okay.
And then eventually he published his first novel, The Time Machine. Then it was crazy because it was 1894, 5, 6, 7 or something. He published every year he published one of these books. But then, he went ahead, everybody, he met everybody, met Churchill, met FDR, very well-known person, had lots of affairs. And then he died.
As you do.
2 years after, or 1 year after World War II ended.
Oh, right, yeah.
Said, time to die.
Okay, how did he die? He's old?
I think so.
It's 80, I don't remember. Right?
66 to 46, so yeah, it must be 80, yeah.
All right.
Wells knew Churchill, and Churchill even referenced him in some of his speeches. The Gathering Storm apparently is something that Wells wrote, and then Churchill used it.
Okay.
And then there is something called, I guess for us, the most applicable thing, there's something called Wells' Law, which basically says, you can have one extraordinary thing.
Oh, right,
You can have the audience take one kind of leap of faith and, trust this one thing, but everything else has to be really believable, really credible, and that kind of helps sell the story.
It's the one big lie.
Yeah, the one big lie.
You're telling a fantastical story, obviously, so you have to make some adjustments to reality, but you make it one big thing. We figured out how to time travel, but everything else is normal.
Mm-hmm.
And that helps to ground it, I guess, and sell it to the audience, is what he said. So
yeah, it's
that's
one conceit. And he had diabetes.
Sure.
The other thing going on at this time kind of was Darwin's theory of evolution.
Mm-hmm.
So he published On the Origin of Species with his Finch drawings a few years before Wells was born. So those ideas were kind of in people's minds. And you can definitely see those influences in this book and the movie as well.
Right, yeah. So we read the book, which is 170 pages.
150. It's pretty short.
It's also size 18 font or something in that book. But anyway, so we read the book and we watched the movie The Island of Lost Souls. It's pretty close. There are some large departures, and also the movie sucked, and the book didn't exactly.
But nothing compared to the departures in Frankenstein.
Oh, no. Okay, so how do you want to talk about this? The concept?
Yeah, so yeah.
Well, first, let me say this. This is the first movie that we've watched in this series and also in all of the YouTube videos that we've done that just like sucked. Like it was bad, honestly.
Yeah, there was a lot about this movie I didn't like. And for the first time, like the quaintness doesn't make up for anything.
Like the question isn't, does this hold up now? It's like, did it hold up at the time? It seemed terrible. Like, especially because now, if this is the first thing we had watched in this, I'd be like, oh, old movies, they're just, they're old. But like compared to Frankenstein, this is like awful.
Yeah, there's so much to talk about. And there's so many similarities thematically between this and Frankenstein. But like the introspection just is gone from the movie.
I got a lot out of it in the sense that it was like a lot of times unintentionally hilarious.
Oh,
so
yeah.
in that way, I enjoyed it. But like the acting, terrible, with the exception of Charles Lofton as Dr. Moreau. Otherwise, the acting was like bad. The pacing was bad. It was slow. It was boring. The story didn't make sense. The action was all like terrible. The cuts were weird. Like it was just all around like it was an hour and 10 minutes. It felt like it was like 2.5 hours long,
Mm-hmm.
But anyway,
yeah.
So
Anyway,
with that out of the way, that it was generally like just terrible. We can go through everything like we normally do, I guess.
yeah. I mean, like the concept. If you don't know the story, basically, vivisection is a thing. So I guess first we have to like lay the scientific groundwork, the quicksand that this is based on.
Okay, so in the summary is this guy lives on a creepy island and he's like a outcast scientist. And
That's Dr. Moreau.
He's turning animals into people through
Vivisection, which is apparently something that the people of the time feared was actually going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, like it was kind of like the vein of not wanting to experiment on animals and stuff like that.
Yeah, I suppose.
More like I got more of like an animal rights vibe out of that movement than like
I see.
You're actually going to turn things into people movement.
True. Vivisection, basically live section, like you're experimenting on people
like
while
doing
they're
surgery
alive.
on people while they're, or surgery on things while they're alive.
Right. And there was like the British Anti-Vivisection Society and whatnot. And so, right, in the 1850s, you have On the Origin of Species, there's Darwin, there's evolution. He kind of doesn't say much on humans in that book. But, there's a debate going on about this. It's interesting to see, like their understanding of evolution and how it could be applied. But like that plus, I guess, whatever modest like scientific breakthroughs they had at the time, plus basic surgical skills like skin grafting and, keeping tissue alive. Those things all come together to create this story. And like I was saying before, it's like somebody discovers like galvanism, for example, you make the frog leg move with a jolt of electricity.
Right.
People think, oh, okay, the entire world works like this now. Similarly here, they see a couple of things, right? They see like skin grafting. They know evolution maybe exists. And then they put those two things together, crank it up to 15. And now it's like, well, through surgery, I can make this dog into a human.
Yeah.
It's insane.
They took like you can graft like skin from your thigh, like onto your face. And then also you can transplant like a pig valve into like a human heart. I don't know if they're doing that back then, but you can. And they took that and like, well, then you can make pigs into people, The thing is, so that's the concept. This guy kind of just inadvertently winds up on this crazy island, and then shenanigans ensue or whatever. And it all falls apart, obviously. But so the scientific stuff about it. So I forget what it's, the limits of plasticity or something. He Wells wrote some sort of, what is it in there?
Find your quotes. All right, so I'm going to read some quotes now from the book. So this is when. All right, let me explain it. Dr. Moreau, evil scientist guy, has an island of lost souls. And then our book protagonist is named Edward Prendick. The name was changed to Edward Parker, I suppose, for more Puritan sensibilities. Anyways, so from the book, Prendick and Moreau are having a conversation about what exactly he's doing on the island. You forget all that a skilled vivisector can do with living things. A squint may be induced or cured by surgery. The grafting of skin and bone is done to facilitate healing. And then he He's saying that the physiology of the creature may be modified through vaccinations and blood transfusions.
Yeah.
You begin to see it is a possible thing to transplant tissue from one part of an animal to another, or from one animal to another, to alter its chemical reactions and methods of growth, to modify the articulations of its limbs, and indeed to change in its most intimate structure. The possibility of vivisection does not stop at a mere physical metamorphosis. A pig may be educated. The mental structure is even less determinate than the bodily. In our growing science of hypnotism, we find the promise of a possibility of superseding old stuff. Keep going. And so he says, I wanted to find out the extreme limit of plasticity in a living shape.
Okay.
And that's his motivation.
Okay, but more interesting to me
Fine.
was that Wells had like, this is laughable, right? That you could take a dog and turn into a person.
Yes.
That's laughable.
It should be.
And I thought that like, oh, that's just some wacky thing for this story. But Wells apparently actually kind of thought that this may be possible, which, 1890, whatever. It's,
They don't know what they don't know.
they don't. But he wrote like not a story, but like an essay about like all these kind of techniques and like, oh, maybe possible. Obviously, no.
Obviously, no.
Okay, so the thing about it, do you just want to real quickly run through why it's not possible? Because, okay, 'cause you can accomplish a lot. Like, you could probably graft you may be able to graft some sort of like weird monkey arm onto a person. Maybe, I don't know. No one would try that, but maybe you could.
Well, okay. So again, like I was saying before, right? For some people, right? If you don't understand the complexities of something, you see just, surface level stuff. It's like if a caveman saw a car and saw that a car went fast, right? Their recreation of a car, like, oh, I can make a car. Maybe they would be able to make the wheels. And they would have like a box, but it would never go. They don't know that an engine exists. They don't know like what a transmission is, how to turn it on. They don't know like gas is what's powering it. They don't understand any of it. All they see is a shiny thing.
Yeah, it's got wheels.
Four wheels. It goes. That's all they understand. And so then maybe they discover the wheel and they're like, oh, we must be like halfway to making this car. They have no idea of how complex it is. And similarly here, right? They mention these like superficial things like you're saying, or, surface level things like grafting and whatnot.
Yeah.
But yeah, the way that he describes it, I mean,
look, like he's saying that you could put different organs in and like those can maybe change the endocrinology, like the hormonal secretions, and that could change stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, but number one, like you can't even transplant like a liver from a person into another person, like just willy nilly, right? Because like there's rejection.
Yeah.
So you much less can't do like a llama heart into like whatever, like a zebra brain or something like that,
Right.
There's the issue of rejection. The biggest thing, there's a lot of things, but the biggest thing is like the brain, Like there's no surgery you can do on the brain to make like a dog smart as a person that can talk, There's nothing you can do.
Do surgery on people to make people like geniuses, right?
Yeah.
Like even if somehow the physical outward stuff didn't matter, like you just put like a dog brain into a people brain, into a people body, into a human's body.
Yeah.
Nothing, right? You're not gonna, you can't connect nothing.
Like no amount of surgery or transplantation or blood transfusion is gonna do anything like that.
Right. And
clearly.
It's
okay, but
it's insane. And even if you had like a dog brain and you raised it as a human or something, it's not gonna do anything. You're not gonna like mold its brain or.
I think in that chapter he was talking about how like part of the problem is that like chimps just don't have a larynx that is capable. So he was kind of suggesting that the reason they can't talk isn't because they're not smart enough per se. It's because their larynx literally can't make the sounds.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if it's true. I don't
Maybe
think
it's true, but why can't they write then?
Yeah.
So
yeah, okay.
It's one of those things, right? You have the four humors and all this stuff. It's, if you don't see it, if you don't have any way of understanding or visualizing it, right, you're never going to understand it exists. So again, you don't know what you don't know. If you don't look for it, you're not going to find it.
And again, like I would let this go because it's just a science fiction thing, but he actually thought it was maybe kind of possible.
Well,
and like it totally isn't.
Right.
Obviously.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, okay, so that's the one concept, right? Here's my other. So Before we had done any of this, did you know anything about the story? Because this is like parodied a lot. The Simpsons did a thing about it. And Treehouse of Horror. This has been made into several movies, so it's pretty famous, right?
Yeah, famous.
Okay, so what I thought was happening is that he was taking, before I watched anything, is that he took people and turned them into like half people animals.
That's what I thought too, is that he was, somehow or another starting with people.
I didn't know he was taking animals and turning them into people. My guess, one of my problems with it is like why?
Just to show that you can do it.
Right, but like what does it lead to that's good? You just make a bunch of like really dumb half people and it's like weird. But you know what I mean? Like, what's his goal? Like, I think
it's just to prove that he can, right? I think this is a lot of villains of the time is just, I'll show the world. They just have like some vendetta against the world, the scientific community at large,
right,
and they'll show them.
He was ostracized by the scientific community. Okay, whatever. I was just like, he's doing all this stuff, and I'm like, it doesn't really. So you made a person. We already know how to make people. We make people all the time. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
It's not that.
Educate them.
Yeah. Not that impressive.
A bunch of resources there.
See what I thought, which was to me also a really dumb premise. What I initially thought was, he's taking people and giving them like animal aspects to make them stronger.
Animorphs or something.
Yeah, or like they can fly. I'm like, that's also dumb.
What I thought as well. And maybe honestly.
But more useful than this.
Honestly, all this probably is stemming from that Treehouse of Horror episode of The Simpsons, because I was probably like 10 or something when I saw it. And in that one, humans are being turned into animals.
Right.
So honestly, probably that is
100% that's where it's from.
Okay.
That's my first exposure to this thing for sure. Dr. Hibbert's Island or whatever. Anyway. Okay, so.
Yeah, so the story in the book starts off with our protagonist, Edward, on a ship. The ship kind of goes down. He's on a boat with two other people. They're going to draw lots to see which of them is going to be eaten, basically. And then in a struggle, the other two end up just falling off of the ship and, dying.
Yeah.
And then
that's in the book, right?
That's in the book. And then our man is brought aboard onto a ship. He meets this guy, Montgomery, who's like I think, dropout medical student from London.
Yeah.
And he's kind of a sympathetic character. And then, they go to the island of Dr. Moreau. And so in the book, the way that it's done is it's not until like halfway through that you have a, conversation with Moreau. So you don't actually meet him until a little bit later. And then, it's like a slow build up and you kind of sort of know what to expect, but not really. And then our author has a realization like a third of the way in.
Okay, here's what I'll say about like both the movie and the book. It takes him a stupidly long time. He's like, something seems odd. And people are like literally like half hyena, like half bull, like doing stuff. He's like, something's weird here, but I can't put my finger on it.
I agree.
I'm like, it's like you're surrounded by literal beast men and you're like, can't put my finger on it, but something seems out of place. Like the waiter, he's literally, in the book, it's like, he has like pointy, hairy ears.
Yeah.
And then he's like, well, let's go on this island.
Eventually he puts it together.
Yeah, eventually he puts it together.
Well, and this one, it's interesting because
like a comically long time.
Our protagonist knows who Moreau is, but he doesn't realize he's on his island. And so he kind of fills in the reader.
It kind of like remembers a little bit.
Right. So in the movie, instead, what happens is he's on a boat, he's rescued, and he ends up on the island. But even as the boat is kind of disembarking, you meet Moreau immediately. And somebody else already tells you like, oh, this is Moreau's island and he's crazy. Like there's no tension there. You don't wonder like, oh, I wonder what's going to happen or who is this guy or what's the bad guy? And maybe it's because the audience already knows about the book, The Island of Dr. Moreau.
Maybe.
But then, it's like they changed the name to The Island of Lost Souls. Maybe I figured, maybe it's because they don't want to reveal that Dr. Moreau is a character or something, but he's in it like 2 minutes in. So any tension with Dr. Moreau is gone like immediately.
Yeah.
And that was probably my biggest complaint of the movie.
That was your biggest complaint?
One of them.
So the pacing is like really slow and like really boring and really weird. Like they don't like cut stuff out that should clearly be cut. Like, for example, when he first wakes up, he like does one of these like 4 times, like 3 or 4 times in this conversation. And like, he does this whole thing where he's like, do you have a wireless, like a I don't even know what it's called, like a telegraph or whatever they had back then.
Sure.
He's like, do you have one of those? The other guy's like, yeah, good. Send a message to my fiance. What do you want it to say? Tell her that I was shipwrecked here and tell her that I'll be back soon. Okay, I will. And then he does. And then he comes back to talk to him again. It's just like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And then like it goes to the whole thing about like it's just like weirdly slowly paced. Like you see her, like she's in wherever she's at.
Up here.
And she like goes to like sit down at a cafe, and you see her like go sit down, wait a little bit. The waitress comes over, takes her order. It's like, why is this in the movie? Like, this has nothing to do with anything.
I guess so. This movie was 70 minutes long, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if there was a runtime expectation
To,
when
like,
audiences went into
kinda,
that
like,
movie.
pad it out.
Yeah, and I think maybe not for that scene in San Francisco, but I think the set design, the animals, the costumes, all that stuff, they probably wanted to, like show that on screen. And I think the audience, like that was kind of the draw. Was like, oh, look at these beast men, and
the captain of the ship is hilariously drunk, and like, so he's been hired to take these animals to the island. He knows this presumably in advance, and it seems like he's done it before, like multiple times, right?
Mhm.
Then all of a sudden he's just really mad about it for
Yeah.
some reason. He's like, I hate this island, I hate these animals, and I hate you. Get off my boat.
And he has a pretty good idea of who like Moreau is and everything.
But why is he so like he knows what he's doing? It's not like he's surprised. You know
right.
what I mean?
In the book, it was different because, the captain had no idea what was, kind of going on.
Kind of didn't know.
Yeah. He just had all these animal cargo and he knew he was going to this island because of Montgomery, whatever. But yeah, in the movie, his.
Like, why is he so upset?
Yeah.
It's like you
shouldn't be
signed up for this,
surprised.
bro.
You
like,
got paid for this.
You knew exactly where you're going and you're not really seemingly inconvenienced in any way. So why are you so
Right.
mad? Anyway,
It's because he had to be, because in his rage, the captain of this boat that rescued our protagonist,
Yeah.
Edward, once they get to Moreau's Island, he's like, no, Edward, you can't stay either. And then, he like throws him overboard. That's
okay,
right.
are you going to put that in there?
Yeah, he throws him
He
overboard.
throws him overboard like 20 feet onto this other boat. And
Yeah,
the guy
we
just
get
gets up
some-
and he's like,
He had a
shucks.
fantastic, was it ragdoll?
like a dummy shot.
Yeah. It's pretty action-packed start.
Yeah.
But it's slow, right? Like we're talking about it and it's boring because the movie itself wasn't terribly exciting.
So the movie, yeah, like you're saying, like immediately it's like, oh, that island, it's a creepy island.
Mm-hmm.
Good thing we won't have to go stay at the creep island. And then like,
Yeah. Oh,
10
there's the
seconds
creep,
later.
by the way. I don't like him because he's a creep.
yeah. And
His
then,
name's Dr. Moreau.
then Dr. Moreau like is immediately weird and creepy.
Yeah.
Like he just keeps like saying things. It's almost like he's doing a soliloquy, like in a play, like where you're just talking to yourself, but everyone can hear. He's like, yes, soon my plot shall unfurl. And like the guy's like, what? And he's like, nothing. Nothing at all.
Yeah. And
He
so,
keeps doing that. And so that's kind of weird too.
right. And so, I think, why do they do it? I mean, so the actor who plays him, Charles Lofton or whatever, I think he was cool.
He was hamming it up. He was fine.
Yeah, he was reminding me of Hedonism Bot.
Yes,
and
he
I'm
did.
all for it. And it's he's in it from the beginning of the movie. He plays a big part in it. If they had followed the book, there's a lot more tension and build up to the reveal of Moreau.
Yeah.
But in this one, they showed him immediately. And I guess the reasons they did that is because the biggest change in this movie is that they added like a love interest. I
Okay,
guess is how I'll describe that.
Let's get into that in a second.
All right.
I want to say first, our main character, he's like a plank of wood with like eyes drawn on it. He's so boring. He's like devoid of character, right? He's just like, okay, thanks,
Yeah.
goodbye, hello.
I mean, they stripped him of all of his agency in the movie.
He doesn't do anything,
Right.
Which is he's our protagonist. So that's like a problem. Okay, the other thing I'll say is just like the book, it's weirdly takes a very long time for him to figure out that, hey, I'm on a weirdo island with beast men. He's surrounded by beast
It's
people.
even more spelled out. Yeah.
Like
than-
clearly not people. Okay. Like maybe he's never seen a National Geographic. It's 1890, but still, they're clearly not. He has no questions. He's like,
it's weird. Yeah.
He didn't even say it's weird. And then they get off the island. There's more creepy beast men just like in the woods, just like looking at him. And he's like, And then Dr. Moreau's got a whip, and he's just like whipping at these people in the woods like constantly. And he's just like, yeah, nothing to see here. This is pretty normal. And they like, it takes him a comically long time until he has any questions. He never has a question, actually.
Yeah.
He never is like, hey, what's up with the everything on this weirdo island? Why are you like whipping at half beast people?
Yeah, and it's,
you know what I mean?
And like you said, yeah, it's from the very beginning that he sees this.
Like immediately. Like there's no, like you're saying, like there's no tension. Like they're like on the boat where he goes to the island, like 5 minutes in the movie, 10 minutes in the movie, right?
5.
Like there's just beast people standing around him. It's not like, oh, like they're kind of like in shadow. It's like, no, they're just broad daylight. There they are.
Yeah.
I'll say one thing. It's kind of messed up when he first gets there. Okay, so like I said, he is comically like all the way from the boat to the island. Dr. Moreau is just like lashing his whip out at people that are like hiding in trees and stuff. And then when they get to like his house, our protagonist, Edward is his name, right?
Yeah.
He's like,
strange looking natives you have here.
Natives, you got some interesting natives on this island. So he thinks that they're people, and then he sees this white dude just like whipping, like lashing his whip out at them the whole time there, and he's like, oh yeah, they're just the native people. This is an appropriate way to treat native peoples.
1931. Yeah, man.
So he just thinks they're people, even though they clearly are not.
Oi. Let me explain how this book, what it did correct.
Okay, because the book's not bad or anything.
The book's not bad. And honestly, it's 150 pages in like you're saying, size 20 font.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is you're in the mind of this guy who, it's framed as a...
He's much less stupid.
Yeah. This is,
what I mean?
The book is framed as a, oh, hey, we found these letters from this crazy guy, kind of.
Yeah.
And so, you read them, and then it's kind of his memoir. But basically, he's like marooned. Is that the word?
Yeah.
At sea. He's scared, and then he's saved. He, sees Montgomery, Moreau's assistant. He hears some weird things. He's kind of freaked out by, all these things happening, these animals, these people who don't really look like people. And then, he gets on the island, and his Montgomery's like, hey, you're an uninvited guest, so we kind of got to lock you in this apartment. And, he hears screaming. It's described really well. This like puma is tortured. He goes to try to escape from the screams. He meets, some people doing some weird stuff. And
it's
very
like
slowly.
It's like little breadcrumbs. He's like here screaming. He's like, oh, that's weird. I want to figure out what's going on. He goes out, he sees something that leads into another thing.
And slowly it crescendos to where he has this realization that, oh, I'm on the island of Dr. Moreau. And then he explains what that is. You, the reader, are like, oh, wow, okay. And then you have him trying to escape. And then you have this explanation by Moreau. And, it's this sort of...
kind of like, it almost like smooths it over a little bit, but then he sees that it goes too far still, and he's like, oh, I got to get out, and then things kind of fall apart. And then you have some
third act action.
Yeah,
but you do have this scene where you have Moreau kind of trying to justify himself, where you have sort of the themes of the book kind of play out.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have this like clash of wills, this is what society thinks, this is what Moreau thinks, then you see the inevitable conclusion kind of play out in the third act, and, there's something there's something to think about. Even if the science is not sound, at least, thematically, there's something to think about.
Yeah.
In the movie.
Okay, so continuing with the movie, you're saying that there's a whole new thing added that wasn't in the book at all, which is the Panther Woman.
Mm-hmm.
Loda. Okay, so that whole thing is completely fabricated, completely new for the movie, and it sucks.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like it's just bad, basically.
It is bad. And, the motivations for it. I mean, so I don't know if you've seen the covers.
Yeah.
For everything. She is the cover.
Right.
No matter what you look at. And
look, let's be real. Like the only reason this movie is popular is because it was in 1931 and there's a chick with a bikini on the cover. Okay. Like that's probably like 80% of its appeal.
And that's true. And so what is it? This film was made in like 1930 or so, which is an interesting time. And we'll probably get to it some later point. But basically you have films. These films have sound starting in like 1929 or something, but this is before the code, which, kind of
like Hollywood censorship.
Yeah,
this
basically,
is pre-code, so this is pre that
like
kind of stuff.
1934, 1935.
So a lot more things
so
were let slide, basically.
Right. And so in this 5-year period, basically you had the Great Depression, and the Great Depression, people were going to the theater less, but they were still going a lot. And so film theaters, they, kind of ham things up, made things more sexualized, and that's why she's in there.
Right. But it's like a really focal point of the movie.
Yeah.
But it's very weak. Okay, so Moreau's taking animals and turning them into people.
Mm-hmm.
He seems to not be doing a great job, honestly, by the shape of his beast men, but
he's very critical of himself.
Conveniently, he takes a panther and turns it into a woman, and then he's like, so his whole thing is like, oh, if I can see if she'll still want to mate with like a human male, it'll prove that like I finally achieved my goal of turning a animal into like a real complete person.
Right.
For some reason, that's his like benchmark, I guess. It's really important to him. But the thing that's like very annoyingly convenient, I hate, like, everyone's like a hairy, disgusting, horrible beast person, right? And then it just happens to be that like the panther woman is like, she's just a woman. 100%. Oh, she has like kind of long nails, I guess.
Yeah.
Kind of. That's it. It's like, clearly you have succeeded, sir. This is a person. She even talks, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, fairly, like, she has a very limited vocabulary, but she's not like grunting or anything. It's like, you've made a person.
Yeah.
So it's just very convenient that, like, obviously she's supposed to have like sex appeal, so they don't make her like a leopard person at all. She's just a person.
Right. It's
a
like
standard human female.
Right. It's like Spider-Man instead of man spider.
Right. Okay, so his big thing is like, he's now like, oh, I have this dude here. I can now see if she'll want to mate with him. This is a amazing scientific opportunity. I've gone through all the expense to get like cheetahs and lions here, but I never thought about getting a guy, a human man over here.
Yeah. And
anyway, so he creepily like tries to get them to mate. Very obviously, he's like, he goes to talk to her, and he's like, I'm going to let you learn some things tonight.
Yeah, talk to him.
I'm going to let you learn something for yourself. A man has come from the sea.
And if there's something else,
something happens and something happens, you know? And then he just like leaves him alone for some reason. Yeah. Like, I don't really know what the explanation is to the guy. And he's like,
I mean, from Edward's point of view, it's like, oh man, oh thank God, I'm on this island. Okay. Hey, what's up? Oh, you're on this island? Huh? Weird people you got here. Okay. And then Moreau just comes in. Hey, this is a girl. Bye. I was like, what? It's like that part in Stargate.
I'm gonna see. Oh, he says, I'll leave you two young people together, and then he kind of like skulks away.
Yeah, and then there's an amazing shot where you're looking at the two of them, Edward and Lota, on like the couch, and as things are getting kind of, I guess, more intimate, the camera just quickly pans to like Moreau in the shadows,
just like creeping, just like staring,
so funny,
standing, looking through bars, just staring, and like
pretty awesome shot.
Okay, the other thing I wanted to say that doesn't really fit in anywhere, but it must not go unremarked upon. So our stupid protagonist, Edward, is still, he's like, okay, these people are beast men, but he doesn't know that Lota, he seemingly doesn't know that she is, because she's very clearly like, seems to be just a person. So I think he thinks that she's just a person. Okay, and so he's married, or he's engaged, right? She comes and sits down, and then unprompted, he just starts petting her, like straight up. Like just petting her hair, being like, hey, what's up?
Yeah.
He thinks that she's a person. So this lady sits down, and he's like, yeah.
That's his bestial instincts coming out.
That's like what he does. Like, that's totally normal. Like, what the hell is that? Because he gets super freaked out when he sees her, like, they're like making out for like a brief moment, and then he like realizes that she has horrible monster well, not even like, just kind of long nails.
Look, I mean, The Simpsons did it. They justified everything. It's okay.
And then like he's like, oh, she's a beast woman. That's what really like puts him over the edge. Like, you really are doing bad things. I don't like you anymore. But he just decided to pet a human female. that he doesn't know very well at all.
Well,
Like, what the hell is
to be
that?
fair, that entire thing was kind of like
Yeah, it's
pretty
kind
fast.
of stupid. But
the other thing they added then in the book, he kind of rescues himself because he, another ship has crashed, and so a boat kind of comes to the island with 2 dead people in it. He gets rid of them and then goes out on the boat himself and is rescued. But he has to do something. In this one, in the movie, his fiance is alerted of kind of his presence on the island, and she goes to rescue him.
He lives on a
sailor.
Dr. Moreau is very secretive. Lives on this creepy it's not on the maps island, but his fiance is able to easily get there.
Yeah.
Like 10 minutes later.
Well, the latitude, longitude.
I know.
That's one thing
like,
that's always blown my mind, and will do so forever. Is just how people navigate on the ocean, especially before like GPS. Mind blowing.
No idea. Also, maybe you can put this in earlier, but this is particularly emblematic of the editing. Remember when like he's dressing down the captain, like the drunk captain from earlier, like meets his fiance, Edward's fiance, and she's like, "Hey, I see that everyone else from the shipwreck is here except for, my fiance." And he's like, "Nah, I never heard of him." She's like, are you super sure? He's like, "Ah." And so she calls the consul. I don't know what that is, but some government official that like brings the captain and basically like dresses him down and is like, "Hey, you shouldn't have done that. Where's the island? Whatever." And he's like, "Oh," he's like sad about it. Okay. But then he goes to leave. He's about to leave. And the consul's like, "Yeah, get out of here, Captain. You did a bad thing. Shame on you. I'll take your license if it all doesn't work out." And he's like, "Oh," and he starts to walk away. And then he's like about to open the door. And then off camera, the guy's just like, "You wouldn't like that, would you?" And he's like, "No, I guess not." And then he goes to open the door again. He's like, "Yeah, you think about that." And he's like, "Okay." And then he leaves.
Yeah.
Why?
I don't know. Maybe the actor needed a specific number of lines or something to be in the film.
Like, it's terrible, comical, and like, it just pacing bad.
And then because his fiance goes to the island, you have more opportunity for sexual innuendo, where Moreau decides, "Oh, maybe I'll let one of the male beastmen see if he can get her pregnant by like turning his eye to sexual assault." I'll say expected things happen, and then Edward's fiance is saved by Edward, who comes in and shoots a gun through iron bars into the room.
Here's the dumbest thing. It's like he seems, well, let's be honest. Moreau is just like getting off on this like weird, proto furry stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but
yeah,
okay, that's this makes more sense to me in the context of the movie than anything else that he says.
Mm-hmm.
But he seems to really want one of his beast men to mate with a human. I guess, like you were saying, if they have viable offspring, that means that like he did successfully transform an animal into a person, because if you can make living offspring, that's the same species, blah, blah, blah.
Sure.
But anyway. But like, if this is so important to him, why did he not just try to bring a person on before? Like, these people came to him by coincidence, pure coincidence. And he's like, "This is amazing. This is the best thing that's ever happened." It's like, why don't you you're importing like zebras and lions and stuff to your
to be
island.
fair, he has a pretty strict like moral, not code, but
the hell are you about to say?
He never vivisected humans. Like, it's more like he's letting things happen.
I know, but he never brought a person in to just see if it would happen.
Ah, I see what you
mean.
Like
a person washes onto his island and he's like, "Oh, this is a great opportunity." It's like, you couldn't just get any person before?
Sure.
People are like the easiest, like that's the simplest thing that you've done so far, is to bring just a person on.
Yeah. "Hey man, I'll pay you $10."
Because he clearly doesn't care too much about, he's like, the panther woman, and there's a guy, and he's like, that's not working. I'll just use the gorilla guy and this new lady.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's kind of just like, it doesn't make any sense. Maybe it was like salacious, and so like, for audiences at the time, it was like,
oh no, 100%. That's why the movie is done like 100%. Yeah. The character in movie character motivations, like you're saying, but like out of like overall in our world, why was this all done? Yes, 100% was to sell tickets.
Yeah. Okay, so there's 2 things that I want to talk about. 2 specific things. I'm sure you remember that. Okay, he Edward, is with the panther lady.
Mhm.
And they're just like sitting and talking or something. And then for some reason they hear screaming from the House of Pain, where he does the surgery. And then Edward's like, oh, what's that about? He goes in, the door's just wide open. They just didn't close the door. So he walks in. He sees for a microsecond, like in like a surgical getup, like standing over a beast person. And then from this, he runs away, derives that.
He says they're vivisecting human beings.
Uh-huh.
And then
he says they're doing vivisection. Vivisection's on people. The natives are your victims. We could be victims. We need to run away. He like almost literally that way.
Yeah, it is that. It is. Yeah, I've written down too. So it's they're vivisecting human beings. Now I get it. Where next? Basically what happens.
But he walks in, sees something for like a microsecond. He's like, I now know all these things.
Right.
In like condensed Black Dynamite logic almost. Like,
yeah.
You know what I mean? And then he's like, we need to leave. It's so stupid.
And he tries to run away, and then at the end of it, the sailor, the captain who came with his fiance to rescue him, he's gonna go out and get his ship ready so that Edward and his fiance can escape.
Dude, and that was so funny, by the way. Remember that this other made up character, Captain Donahue, who takes Edward's fiance onto the island.
Mm-hmm.
He gets onto this creepy island also. They see weird stuff, and he's like, yeah, you see weird. It's like you see some weird stuff on these islands, and then like he hears like maniacal laughter, and he's like, some birds laugh like people.
He's just, dude, he's hilarious. And then as he's trying to get his boat, Moreau has one of his beastmen murder him, and he says basically, there's no law tonight, and like basically enacts like a purge type situation.
So it's actually so poor. Well, it's so poorly described, or the stuff with the beastmen is like the majority of the book.
Right.
Like the interactions between the beastmen, their society, and like our character.
And I'll say in here, so the beastmen live on the island and they have like a set of laws. And in the book, the beastmen came up with these laws. And the laws are, like don't.
They did?
Yeah. And then I think Moreau even makes fun of them.
I thought he came up with the laws to stop them from descending into beasthood.
No, and then in the book, I think it was because there was like 6 other people who came onto the island with Moreau. 3 of them they died or ran away or whatever.
Yeah.
But they like tried to impart some morals onto these animals, and so the law sayer, has they have this like code.
Walk on 2 legs, not 4.
Yeah.
Don't eat meat.
No flesh. Yeah, and don't spill blood. I think.
They don't 4 of them, but I don't remember.
Sure, but they had these laws, and in the book, like Moreau made fun of them for it.
Yeah. Well, the weird thing is in the book, like all the beast people are just kind of rejects. Like Moreau doesn't do anything with them really. Yeah. Like he's just like their failed experiments, and he's like, they're there, but I don't care about them, or I'm not trying to make a society or anything. They're just like there. I just tossed my rejects out there, basically.
Yeah. Whereas in the movie, he is trying to like play like some weird emperor.
Yeah, you do. I mean,
he's the one who's saying these laws to them,
right? And he's like seems to be enjoying their like veneration and stuff like that. But I mean, it's not very well explored. But it seems like he's getting something out of this. I don't know, being God to these beast people,
right? Which isn't what the book was like. And then the '96 version, it seems like Marlon Brando
I don't know, like
takes it up a notch.
Yeah, I don't know.
Reminds me of Baron Harkonnen?
Yeah. Huh.
Anyways,
what the hell are we talking about?
So that's the story, basically. Okay, so the purge is enacted, and eventually,
they
get a taste for man flesh.
So, like within the course of about
a night,
20 minutes, like they kill this other Captain Donahue that comes on board because the guy's just like,
oh, this is so awesome.
The guy's like, hey, he goes and says, hey, I killed this guy to all the other beastmen. And the law sayer's like, you're not supposed to kill anybody. He's like, he told me to kill him. Yeah. All bets are off from that point.
Just that. Then what is it? I think the person who killed him said, he was a person. Yep. And you killed him? Mm-hmm. Isn't Moreau a person? Mm-hmm. And can we kill him? It was, it's kind of like that.
It was exactly like that.
Yeah.
He was like, you killed him? So we can kill that guy. And he's like, yeah. It's like, let's do it.
So
about that fast too.
Yeah, that happens a lot in this movie. Is people just say like 3 sentences, and honestly, maybe it is how it would go down, but it's just like it would take a few more minutes. But
dude,
it's
like,
so funny how quickly things change.
in the book, you get like a descent, like a slow, like kind of like breakdown of their laws and like stuff like over like a year. This is like
A night.
like 20 minutes. And then Moreau sees that they murdered this guy.
Mhm.
They're like setting fire to their little village. They're clearly in what can only be described as bloodlust. And then he's like, I got it.
Yeah.
He just goes out there with his whip and he's like, hey, shut up. And guess what? It doesn't work.
Yeah.
So they murder him.
And then our 3 survivors, Montgomery, Edward,
It's
and
in a rowboat or something. Like,
yeah, they get on a little boat dinghy. I wish I knew nautical terms.
Oh,
I
dude.
looked up a lot reading this book, but
yeah,
still.
half past the mizzen mast on the
Right.
fore whale. Like,
but yeah, they leave, and Edward's just like, "Don't look back, darling."
that's
And
it.
then, unfortunately and expectedly, Lota dies.
Oh, right.
At fending off an attack from one of the other beastmen.
Yeah, they like just kill each other.
So that's the plot, and it differs from the book, and I think it makes it worse because all the tension is gone. And the book, I liked it that it was the main thing in the book is like you heard this like puma, and it goes on for a while. This like puma basically being tortured,
Mm-hmm.
and just talks about its screams and how they become like more human and how
But there's no panther woman, puma woman. I mean, barely.
right. But it's more about what's going on, kind of the morality of it, those sorts of things.
The book actually has like philosophical underpinnings and themes and
questions,
stuff. Like
yeah.
what's the difference between a beast and a man, and like exploring these scientific concepts. Is it possible?
And the movie kind of does it, but like, I mean,
No, it
again, like we're saying, like
doesn't,
it
like-
mentions evolution, but what is it? He says something like, there's just with a slight change in a single unit of germplasm.
Yeah.
This like hokey pseudoscience.
I made this asparagus 100 times the size of a normal asparagus.
Yeah.
I could cure world hunger, but instead I'm turning panthers
that's
into
true.
people.
Yeah. But yeah, this like terrible reading of like evolution, this weird application of that.
Yeah.
And then again, like in Frankenstein, he also says the words, do you know what it's like to be God?
Oh, yeah. Do you want to talk about how, like, it was right during that time, they just kind of glossed over. He's like, and my crappier beasts I used to power my laboratory by walking on a giant hamster wheel.
Oh, yeah.
And he just kind of like, like looks out a window and there they are. Like, what?
Dude, I mean, yeah, I don't know what to say. The themes are in the book, it's, what is it to be human? What's like the line between like man and beast, and
Yeah.
what are our instincts, and what does it mean to be human? Maybe those sorts
Stuff
of
like that,
questions,
yeah.
and how far can we go, and science and whatnot. Questions are sort of asked in the
Yeah.
book. But in the movie, it's just mustache twirling villain.
I mean, the movie it really doesn't give you much of anything, right? Like this, it's just like, there's a creepy island. There's,
Yeah, and again, like I was saying, the main character has no agency, right? In the book, you can say, well, he chose to kind of fight when he was on that boat with the 2 other marooned people.
yeah.
He refused to like, draw lots to see which of them would die. Initially, he gets on the island, but he's the one who decides to like go out and explore. He decides what to do, and he is given kind of choices by Moreau, like, hey, come with me if you want to see how things go. And then, there's an entire section of the book where he's asking the questions. He's coming up with his own conclusions.
Yeah. You're getting his like thoughts on these things that are happening. In the movie, he appears to have no thoughts almost.
Right. I mean, he's like literally he's thrown overboard onto the ship. They take him into the island. He doesn't really have a choice.
Yeah.
He meets Moreau immediately. There's no questions. Moreau just kind of tells him what's going on, basically.
Yeah.
Like, there's really nothing.
Yeah. And he just kind of like is,
The interesting people for me, again, I mean, it's kind of funny, is like his fiance. I mean, I was like, oh, wow, look at her. She figured it out. Yeah.
Really much went out of her way to go get him. Like, she did more to rescue him off that crazy island than he did.
Right.
Like,
Which I love that. And then,
and like, he doesn't rescue himself either. Like Montgomery does it. Like, he just decides to get them off the island.
the main character is terrible. So it's more like you're just kind of along for the ride. and there's really no thought required of you. It's just look at these sets, look at these beastmen. Ooh, lady.
The main characters are unlikable except for Monroe, but he's the villain.
Right. That actor, so Charles Lawton, Daniel Day-Lewis said he was like Lawton was like Lofton, I don't know, was one of like the best actors of that era, and that he's one of his like big inspirations.
Sure, I mean,
which
I can see. I mean, he has a natural charisma. You know,
he's interesting.
He's really hamming it
like
up.
Hilarious smiles and
Okay, so why? I don't know if you want to talk about this now, but like, why is this movie in this book? Why is this story and concept like so? Like, there's been there's like a lot of references to it, parodies to it. There's been multiple movies made based on this book. Like, why? When I look at it, I'm not like I don't see the lasting appeal, I guess. Or like, I don't see like why it's such it forms one of the bricks in the wall of our foundation of science fiction stuff. But why? I read that it was like one of the first one of the first instances of like uplifting in science fiction, which is like a big trope in science fiction where like a more advanced civilization will like try to uplift a less advanced civilization. In this case, humans uplifting beasts.
Yeah, I guess the societal origins of that are pretty obvious.
I don't know what's in this movie. Why does it resonate with people? You know what I mean?
I don't think it was the themes that really resonated.
What was it?
It depends. It depends on who it is that you're saying is looking at this movie as inspiration, right?
Well, it made it into this book, and I don't know why.
Where did I say this? I think I said it on Frankenstein or something. But in book form, all stories, in order to be a good story, you kind of have to have a lot of things. You have to have good themes, good characters. There's usually going to be like some internal monologue, some thinking, right? And so no matter what the book is about, it could be about, like Victorian era love interest. It could be about, going on an island with creepy monsters. But the way that the story is told and sort of the emotions that you go through are pretty similar in a book.
Mm-hmm.
I think in a movie, I think in science fiction, it benefits from visual media more than most other types of stories. And I think before film was very popular, I don't think, there were many comic books or anything, right?
Mm.
So I think you could write stories like this, science fiction stories, monsters, whatever, but, it's not as apparent what it is, or it's not as shocking as if it's shown on a screen.
You trying to say it's because of the visuals that made it last?
So
the visuals of like Beastmen?
This is the first time that you had these visuals that were so striking.
Were they that striking though? I mean, even Metropolis, I was like, that's striking to me now. Even I get it.
I think the costumes and everything are actually pretty good. The set design, we can talk about that in a second. But that plus kind of the moral, oh, that's interesting. Plus,
there's none of that.
I think the background scientific advancements of the time, which were kind of in the public consciousness, that's maybe what was different compared to 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, is you could have like weird monsters, right? Like Gorgons, Medusa, these sorts of things. But when you add in this like quasi scientific explanation, I think that makes people sort of like, oh, that's interesting.
But why does this book, not in this book, this movie, the other movies that we've seen, old though they may be, I can kind of see their lasting impact on science fiction as a genre, kind of. In different, like Metropolis, even the C-3PO suit or whatever, right? Frankenstein, right? Like, it's Frankenstein. I don't see it for this, though. You know what I mean? It seems a lot of the fame of this movie is tied in with, like, the pre-code stuff, and, like, that it's just shocking to have, like, beast people, the makeup, and then, like, the stuff about, like, bestiality almost. Like, it's just shocking to people in 1932.
Yeah.
I think that seems to be the thing that, like, this movie's, like, lasting film legacy, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, in this book, Alex Garland, who directed Ex Machina, credits this movie as, like, one of his inspirations for that.
Makes
kind of like the human robot relationship.
Like, it makes no sense to me. To me, this movie is, like, it just sucks. Like, it's kind of devoid of.
As a movie, the plot, the themes, the story, I don't think is good, and the book did a better job.
Like the
but-
shock value is not, it's not there anymore.
Well, let's talk about the things that this movie did well, because there are a few things.
All right.
I think.
Hit me with it.
All right. So look, the acting, I think Charles Lofton as Moreau,
Yes.
that's a good part. The guy who plays Montgomery's fine, and then
Bela Lugosi.
Bela Lugosi as
He's
the law
fine.
sayer. That's fine. And then who's the captain? Donahue. He was funny.
Yeah, but he was kind of out of place.
He was. So acting wise, it's all right. Filmography, there was some unintentionally hilarious shots, but I think credit is definitely due to the people who chose the costumes. I mean, so our characters are basically dressed in all white.
Mhm.
And then the filmography with that, it's a black and white movie with really like high contrast lighting. It
Mhm.
looks really good. There's a lot of scenes that are really, I guess, evocative with their contrast.
Name some. I don't remember any. Do you?
I mean, all the scenes where you see Moreau in, with that Venetian blind effect.
You mean when he's like creepily spying on a panther lady trying to have sex with like a plank of wood man?
Mhm. Like those scenes, or I mean, I'll just play them, but there's a lot of high contrast, good looking shots. The framing maybe, isn't as great, but the shots, the lighting, I'm a huge fan of.
Mm.
And the costume design for our human characters, but then also for the beast people, I mean, it looks good. It's convincing.
Yeah.
Like there's most CGI these days doesn't hold up to this.
It looks good in a lot of the, I mean, it's 1930s effects and stuff, right? So I don't know what the time, but it does hold up decently. I mean, they all kind of look like the Wolf Man,
Sure. But it's better than a lot of bad CGI today. A lot of mediocre CGI today.
But I'm not immediately hit with the like, oh, I didn't like this movie, but I do get why it stood the test of time or why we're still watching it or talking about it. I don't get it. I think this could be forgotten to the sands of time without much of, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't see much in it that's like iconic or, like the impression I'm getting is that it was really shocking at the time, thus leading to its popularity.
Yeah.
But as to a contribution to like science fiction, I don't really see it.
I'm sort of with you. I mean, the beast people, that's really the big element. If you take that away, then this guy's on an island with somebody who might want to hurt him, and that's scary. It's not so crazy. We touched on it, but basically the motion picture production code.
Yeah.
So this existed, right? So films were a new thing. They weren't very well regulated. And I guess there was concern that the government was sort of going to step in and possibly regulate this industry. And so it was in 1935 that this code really started being enforced. And I think it'll become maybe a little bit more apparent in the next few movies we watch. But
so like my understanding of the code is, so pre-code movies are like pre-1934. So they're known for like having more
things that were found more controversial.
Yes, they had more freedom to like kind of make films about anything. So there was more, I think there was a lot more sexualized stuff because it sells, right?
Yeah, and especially so at this time, so talkie started after 1929, and because of the Great Depression, attendance went down, and so in order to kind of bump it back up, I think studios went even a little more extreme than before.
So what I was reading, what happened is that they would have the film companies would release these movies, and they'd have problems because before any sort of like standardized censorship or ratings were occurring, it was kind of like up to the city or the state, like individual states.
Localized,
yeah, very localized to be like, no, we don't like this, or yes, we like this, cut this out, leave this in. And it financially for the studios, it was like not good because they're like, okay, well, for Kansas, we got to cut out this part and send it over there. And then like for New Jersey, we got to cut out this part. So they kind of like, I don't know if they came up with, but they kind of wanted a system.
Yeah, I mean, it saved them a lot of money, millions.
Yeah,
I mean,
so they wanted like some sort of rating system, not a rating system, but a system
to where they didn't have to go back and forth, back and forth.
They're like, this will be acceptable to everybody. But what kept happening before 1934, it seemed like they'd want a little bit of regulation so they knew it was okay. But then they'd be like, nah, but all of our sexy stuff sells pretty well. So just yeah, whatever. Just put it out there. And that kind of like went back and forth like that until eventually in like the 30s, 1934, 1935, because of increased pressure from the Catholic Church and like religious groups protesting and stuff like that, basically pre-code, the regulatory body had no teeth. Post-code, it's like when the pressure and the influence of these groups was sufficient enough to actually like put a strain on the studios. So they started to pay attention. Also, I read what was more important is that their cleaner stuff started to make a lot more money.
Yeah, this is a Shirley Temple time.
Yeah, the Shirley Temple, came out and that did really well. And they're like, like clean stuff can do fine.
Yeah.
And so they stopped making as much money off of the more risque, daring stuff. So they were more okay with accepting regulation, it seems like.
Yeah. And, it's some part of me is like, you know what? Maybe this movie would have been better without, it would have been better without like the forced like romance and these plots.
Yeah. But then what would even be in the movie?
Well, this book would be in the movie,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But, with the code, the problem isn't just like the sexualized stuff. The problem is that because of the code, you couldn't have like commentary on like, social problems or anything like that. So there's a lot more widespread
it wasn't just that. It was
yeah.
like anti-heroes, social issues.
Right. You can't the end was basically evil is wrong as good as right. That's kind of what they always wanted to say. And so
even things that were like, just kind of morally ambiguous were like not afterwards not well tolerated.
Yeah, there was a quote from called The Nation. There's a quote they published and it was something like, if crime was never like shown in like a sympathetic way, then like law and justice become synonymous.
I see.
Yeah, so you can't really like the Boston Tea Party is what they said. Like you can't like you couldn't show the Boston Tea Party in like a sympathetic way because they broke the law, even though.
Right. Okay.
Right.
Like you couldn't have like the Joker movie, right, where he's like a crazy anti-hero kind of thing. Like So pre-code era movies are kind of popularized because they're like old movies, but they explore like more complicated themes than like Shirley Temple's dancing and whatever,
Yeah. Oh, the other two things, by the way. So you couldn't show, what was the word you?
Miscegenation?
Right.
It feels
bad to say it. Yeah. So you couldn't show any kind of
mixed race relationships.
Yeah. None of that. And very specifically, you couldn't show any white slavery, which... So
was Ben-Hur that right? They got
in
trouble for that, I think.
Oh wow, yeah. So this lasted, into the 60s. So until like the 65s, that then you had what we have now,
the MPAA rating system.
This code became like the Motion Picture Association of America, whatever it's MPAA, and now we have G, PG, PG-13. This came from that. Like we're still following that in a way.
Yeah.
Now you have a little bit more freedom, but.
So anyway, I don't know how we got here, but I think that was the
external factors that made this movie happen and what happened after this movie are maybe the more interesting parts of its history.
Yeah. From a science fiction perspective, I get nothing.
Yeah, the concept is that this guy's turning animals into
it's like that
humans.
Can't happen with science, but
yeah. But I talk about it a lot, that difference between like fantasy and science fiction, and because of the lackluster scientific basis of this is basically fantasy.
Yeah.
And because there's no actual like questioning, like there's no deeper inspection of what Moreau's doing.
There's not a lot of exploration of the concept, right?
Yeah.
There's not a lot of like, should we do this? Why do we do this? How does this change the world that we can do this? Nothing like that.
And I don't even know what like the real world analogies to this are.
I don't know.
So yeah, as a story, it's meh. As a kind of horror book, it kind of works. But then when you take all that out in the movie is kind of boring, kind of just clickbaity. I'm going to say it's clickbait. This movie is clickbait.
This seems like the kind of movie that you could make a heavily edited like YouTube essay, like 20 minutes long, and make it look amazing. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like just take certain shots
this
and then like,
you could.
Maybe you can make everyone think is great as long as they never saw it. You know what I mean?
Because when you do stuff like that, you can impart any sort of social commentary to it. You don't have to deal with like the bad pacing of the movie or anything.
Right.
But no, really, I think people should watch some of these movies that we're seeing,
but not this one.
I don't care. They can feel our pain.
Yeah. It was honestly, it was pretty funny. like unintentionally funny a lot of the time.
And then, yeah, so after this, for a second, we watched the 1996 version. I don't know what happened. So I think this book is maybe not the precursor, but it's sort of similar to books like Contagion or Jurassic Park, like Michael Crichton stuff.
Maybe, yeah.
And so I think what happened maybe is Jurassic Park came out in 1993, did pretty well. It's this weird, like, ooh, science horror thing.
Yeah, maybe you're right.
And then, yeah, they're like, ooh, what other properties like that exist? And ooh, the Island of Dr. Moreau. What made me think of that is kind of the opening of the 96 movie is this sort of Gattaca. Oh, God. So Gattaca probably also goes into this genre. Medical science fiction maybe is the word. But
you know, you can cut this out. But I've determined through our discussions and stuff like that I have kind of like a prejudice against biological science fiction. I don't really like it. Like, it's not really my thing. Like, all of the science fiction concepts that are more like medical or biological in nature, like, I don't like those as much as the ones that are more like we found out like how to make a spaceship. You know what I mean? I don't know why, but it's kind of like they use the science to like say, boom, there's dinosaurs now. And then it's just a horror movie with dinosaurs, but it doesn't really explore the philosophical concepts too much. It does a little bit like nature always finds a way and stuff like that.
right, should we do this?
It does a little bit, but
And what's his face even looks like in his white suit, like Dr. Moreau.
right. But
And he has an island.
yes, no, very much so. But when I think of science fiction, I think of spaceships. You know what I mean?
I get it.
Like, I think of like
The
spaceships, robots, quantum entanglement, stuff like that. So they seem like the difference between like 2001 and Jurassic Park. To say those are in the same genre seems, you know what I mean?
Sci-fi fantasy, I think, has that problem, unfortunately.
The thing is, though, even Star Wars, which is obviously science fiction, has like no science in it at all. It has actually magic.
Yeah, I mean, I think, let's see, if we had to break this down into two main things.
The what?
Like
two main
if you
things?
had two axes,
Uh-huh.
like what could you, like past, future,
For describing
like
science.
the x-axis, and then on the y-axis, I don't know, like maybe like
I don't know.
like what is it? Because usually you can break down
I
like
think what you would do more is like you'd have soft versus hard science fiction. You know what I mean? Soft
Sure.
is like Star Wars, where they don't discuss science in any way, shape, or form, and hard is like Star Trek, maybe.
For All Mankind.
Sure, where it's very hard on the science. Like a big part of it is like explaining to you how the science actually works.
Yeah.
Even though it's theoretical.
I guess
or whatever.
Arrival might be. Okay, sure.
You know what I mean? One is like just space magic and lasers, and then you have like a sliding scale all the way to like super, like a Project Hail Mary or whatever. Like, it's all very grounded in real and a little bit of fake or theoretical science.
I guess
really think of
most biology science fiction takes place in the present.
right.
That's one thing. So it's not, so it is always like real world. And I think when something takes place in the present, you are going to be more critical of it, and you're going to have a greater fund of knowledge to criticize it subconsciously or consciously on the surface. And so with all these things, right? Gattaca, Jurassic Park, Island of Dr. Moreau, we're over here talking about like the scientific basis and, you know, oh, this isn't possible or this is. Whereas if we were talking about something like Star Trek or whatever, maybe it's because we're not like physicists, we wouldn't be necessarily, you know, bogged down by those details.
Maybe. Yeah. I think part of it is like it trends more towards
Horror.
monster horror stuff.
Yeah.
Like Gattaca, I would say,
Like drama, science fiction.
but that is more like it's a future world. The world is different because of it. They kind of explore why, and so I like that. I feel like the other stuff doesn't do it. You know what I mean?
In those kinds of scenarios, when you have science fiction that's set in the future and that has sort of these non, I guess, biological or whatever starts, then you can kind of see how it affects, like you're saying, like the future, all of humanity, etc. But when you have more biological changes, usually it is a much more closed issue. I guess like Resident Evil is like sci-fi fantasy.
Yeah.
In order to make compelling stories with medical, biological changes, I think you need to focus the story a lot more inward. And I think sci-fi in general doesn't do that enough, especially when you want to make like these big budget movies. And so the movies usually end up being pretty poor as well. So maybe that's why. It's not necessarily like because maybe if you read the books, right? Maybe you'd like reading like what Michael Crichton books or these sorts of things. Maybe they work a lot better.
No, I mean, like I like Jurassic Park a lot. But
Sure.
I don't think of it as like a. When
Yeah,
I
you,
think of
you
like
enjoy it as like an action movie, not
you
a
don't think of it as like a
movie.
science fiction movie.
Yeah, it doesn't make you think. It just makes you.
It is, right, but you don't really. I feel like you don't really think of it that way. Like you don't say like I feel like watching a science fiction film, and like Jurassic Park probably doesn't come to mind immediately.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get it.
I guess part of it is like a lot of it is like inserting yourself into a different, like Star Trek. They do medical biological stuff, but you could insert yourself into Star Trek, and you're like the world is completely. It's like different, very different. Jurassic Park, you like insert yourself into like you're just inserting yourself into the 90s, but there's dinosaurs around. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it also helps that I guess as an example, in one of the Star Trek in Deep Space Nine, one of the main characters is actually like genetically engineered.
Oh yeah,
And it's a huge thing because if you were to, if you wanted to focus a story on genetic engineering currently, right, in like the year 2020, whatever, then the way that the story would go somehow is like, you're trying to do it, the government's kind of outlawing it, but at this point, there's only one or two people who have had it done, and the implications of this, the ramifications, they're all theoretical. But if you're in the future and you try to do some kind of biological concept, you can already have the story. So for example, in this case, this person is genetically engineered, but they go into the background details saying, hey, this was outlawed like 60, 70 years ago. You were never supposed to have had this done. And we have laws in place preventing you from being in this position because you have an unfair advantage. And then he has to like hide it, whatever. There's character drama.
right.
But, you already kind of deal with, you already have all of these big, grand things that have happened in this world because of this biological concept, and that you can't do that in the present day.
Yeah.
And then if you have biological concepts, I guess, in the future, then you're going to inherently have what you might consider more interesting sci-fi elements anyways.
It's more interesting to me. I mean, that's my
I'm with you
particular...
though. Like I'm with you too, because I like having more grand, I like asking questions. And you can either have the entire world be super different because of something, or you can like ask questions in a good way internally. The problem is that that second thing is like never done in film. It's done in TV shows sometimes, but it's done in books a lot, but it's really annoying. So that's yeah.
Yeah, it does take more time to explore, or it does a lot of time benefit from like a book where you can kind of explore it at a more slower pace or something.
Slower pace, but you also get,
just like more
internal,
information.
Dialogue and stuff.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, this film was considered against nature in Great Britain. It was banned for like 30 years.
I guess we didn't mention, but like a large part of the reason why it's controversial is because of the evolutionary angle to it. I think a lot of people didn't like it and protested it because of the stuff about exploring, because it kind of is, the movie assumes that human evolution is like a given, which in 1931 it certainly wasn't. You know what I mean?
Not only that, I think the movie doesn't even like do it right. Like,
well, no, they don't.
Right.
Do it
which
at all.
unfortunately probably only adds to like the misconceptions that people have about these things.
Yeah,
which is very frustrating. But go ahead.
Oh, that's right. He says that like in the movie, all evolution is trending towards the human form or humanity, and I'm like, parakeets aren't trending towards people, dog.
Yeah, and then he says like, oh, I destroyed hundreds of thousands of years of evolution, and I also advanced things hundreds of thousands of years.
Yeah, like in a plant. By making it big or something.
They don't know what a genome is. They don't know what DNA is. Like they know like, was it Mendelian genetics? Like they can make a blue and a red plant become like a
wrinkly blue-red plant.
Yeah. Like that's usually when I watch movies from like a certain time ago, I expect monologues and whatnot.
Boring stuff.
Yeah, which
pacing to be off.
But I'm fine with monologues sometimes because it is like asking deeper questions.
Yeah, this movie,
I'm afraid that we're just gonna get to like Monster of the Week stuff and it's gonna suck.
Yeah. Well, we'll see.
We'll see. Yeah. Apparently there was actually like some, like how video killed the
Radio star.
radio star. Yeah. Well, apparently, like back in this time, there was actually like oh man, radio's on par with, or movies are catching up to radio.
Oh, that's funny.
That's really funny. Yeah. What's our opening gonna be?
Oh, dude, you'll find it in there somewhere.
This movie wasn't as racist as I expected it to be. I think they could have gone a lot. I could think they could have done a lot worse.
Yeah.
It is kind of messed up. Like, our Panther woman comes in and, really all the other Beastmen have like all this, like you're saying, like all this hair, makeup, all this stuff done, and they don't look exactly human. But she, the only thing that's, I guess, expected to be different about her is she has like curly black hair.
She has like eyeliner.
Yeah. And then
He's a panther, can't you tell?
And Moreau's just like, oh yeah, she's Polynesian.
Oh god, that's right.
She's a pure Polynesian.
He like took a panther and turned into a woman, and he's like, she's Polynesian. Don't worry about it. It would be more messed up if she looked more like an animal, but the whole thing is, there's a lot of landmines in here that you could step on.
Again, I expected them to have stepped on a lot more.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
That's something.
Oh man.